Welcome to Kingdom Wholesalers, where faith meets finance and purpose powers profit. We're building something new, a bold community of Christian wholesalers committed to advancing God's kingdom in financial services. Join us as we reveal God's work on Wall Street and discover your path to participate so your life will echo into eternity. Today we sit down with John Coleman, co-CEO of Sovereign's Capital, to explore how faith-driven investing is reshaping the marketplace. With his leadership experience at Invesco, McKinsey & Company, and Bridgewater, John now helps guide a firm that aligns capital with purpose. We hope you catch the vision and join the movement. John, you're clearly on a journey of shaping the landscape of faith-based finance. What was the pivotal moment or conviction that first inspired you to integrate biblical truth into the world of finance?
You know, my journey to this world of faith-driven investing or faith-aligned investing was kind of a providential one. I had worked for big companies most of my career. So I had spent some time at McKinsey, as you mentioned, spent about 9 years at a large investment firm called Invesco. And in 2019, I'm a writer as well. And my publisher, Harvard Business Review, had asked me to write their guide to purpose. So the HBR guide to crafting your purpose. And as I was writing that, I just got increasingly convicted that while I was living with purpose in various ways, and I had been able to achieve some of that in my work, that I actually could lean into that more with my work. I was kind of convicted by the advice I was giving others, and I took a look at my own job and started thinking, is there a way I can do this more purposefully and more aligned with my deepest values? I was mid-career to some extent at that time, thinking about the next phase. And so I elected to leave my large firm at that time and went on this journey to try and figure out what was next. Explored a variety of things. So I started looking around at other asset managers, decided it wasn't quite the right fit, started thinking about family offices and explored some of those, and eventually came to the conclusion that one of the things I wanted to do was to get more entrepreneurial, to start something. And so I had elected to begin fleshing out a private equity firm. I was going to start with a friend, and I went looking for seed capital. And two of the people that I approached were these two guys, Henry Kasner and Luke Rausch. And I had heard Henry and Luke invested in Christians. I was a Christian. I needed some investors. So I thought these are the guys to go to. I'd met Luke before, and they liked the idea. And they said, you know what, we're going to be some of your seed investors. But we're building this firm, Sovereign's Capital. We've been on this journey for 8 years. We really want to think about growing and institutionalizing both the firm and the space for faith-driven investing. Would you mind giving us some advice as you're thinking about whether to start this firm just in the midst of standing your own thing up? And so for a few months, I dug into that with them. And I got to know the faith-driven investing space. Henry and Luke had founded Sovereigns in 2012. They had started Faith-Driven Investor and Faith-Driven Entrepreneur in 2018, which were intended to kind of democratize access to these ideas of faith-driven investing and entrepreneurship. And I kind of fell in love with the movement. And as we were going through this, at some point, Henry and Luke called me and said, you know what? We were feeling convicted. Instead of starting your own firm, what if you came and helped to lead Sovereigns? And at that time, you know, Sovereigns was a reasonably small firm in the space. They had done predominantly venture capital investing. But I fell in love with Henry and Luke. I fell in love with the mission that they were on. I remember this was during COVID. So actually my first flight during COVID was out to Henry's house in California. And I spent a day with him. And I got home that night and I remember talking to my wife about it. And like many instances in my life, my wife was clearer than I was, sooner than I was. And I told her about this and I said, it's a big risk. It's entrepreneurial. I don't know about this faith-driven investing thing. That seems a little bit weird. It's different than what I've done before. I'd actually only been exposed to it through Eventide, Jeff's firm previously, because I had met Mark Wombolt and others. And my wife said, John, you got to do this. Like, these are the kind of people you want to work with. These are your most deeply held values. Forget about the risk. Just go into this and try and build something really special here and trust that this will work. And so I joined Sovereign's Capital in February of 2021. I joke that I got on the plane and by the time I had landed, I had accepted the job with Henry and Luke without really knowing what the job was or what I'd be paid or anything. We had no details sorted out and I accepted the job. Probably not a great negotiating tactic for those thinking about their next steps. But now I've been on that journey for 4.5 years. And it's been every bit as fulfilling as I could have hoped for. I write a lot about human flourishing and purpose. I think a lot about my faith and how that applies to problems in the world that I love. I had never known that I could combine my passion for investing with my faith, with that passion for impact, for cultural impact. And I've been able to do that with Sovereigns, and it's been honestly the best 4.5 years of my career. It's been an amazing journey as I've taken it.
Oh, I love the passion there. And, you say that you didn't know that you can combine your passion or your interest in investing with the sense of meaning. And I think that so many followers of Jesus who show up vocationally, specifically here, the financial wholesalers that we're trying to reach and rally who carry the bag. But I think there is an ache in all of us that we wake up in the morning with the sense of, I'm meant to be a part of something bigger, and we're trying to connect those two. And sometimes it's this idea I have to leave my job to go find sacred work. What we're trying to do at Kingdom Wholesalers is frame the plan A of God back into the financial wholesalers role to go, no, you can do both. And I love the fact that you open up with a story that speaks to you doing just that. What is it, if you were to describe that you'd say was worth giving your life to say, I've got to make this shift?
Yeah, our mission at Sovereigns, which we shaped just a few years ago, is to love God and love our neighbor through investing, which I joke is kind of not unique in the Christian world. That's the Great Commandments. Obviously, we plagiarized it, although I think the guy we plagiarized it from is okay with it. It is very unique for an investment firm, I think. I'm not sure any other investment firm has that mission. And I've always felt convicted that my personal mission in life was to help other people flourish, right? It's one of the things I prided myself on in my work previously at Invesco and other places, investing in my team. It's one of the reasons I write about purpose and meaning so much. And I'm now starting to do that about money a bit. And this idea that I could use investments to help other people flourish, both limited partners, those we're serving, where we can seek a market leading return, but also seek to guide their assets in a way that they'd be proud of, but also shape these companies. I dominantly work in private markets. And so we have the privilege of sometimes owning entire companies, of partnering substantially with firms. And we work with those companies, with those real estate developments, et cetera, to bake practices oriented towards love of neighbor or human flourishing into those companies, communities, et cetera. In my research on purpose and flourishing, we are in a crisis of purpose right now. In fact, the Harvard and Baylor Project on Human Flourishing just released their Global Flourishing Survey last week. And one of the findings from that is that GDP and a sense of meaning and purpose in work, or a sense of human flourishing, are actually inversely correlated, I should say, meaning that as countries get richer, the feeling or experience of human flourishing in those societies often goes down. And here in the United States, for example, only around 20%, 15 to 20% of people feel engaged at work. They don't seem like they're getting a lot of purpose and meaning from their work. However, as investors, where we have a say in the operations of these companies, we can seek to bake in practices that help people to experience flourishing, that help them get closer in their relationships, to find meaning and purpose in their work, to connect to a higher power sometimes, and really leave the workplace at the end of the day better than they came in the morning, which I find such great fulfillment from. And I think most people who steward capital haven't fully thought through how their capital, because it owns companies, it owns real estate developments, can be used to deeply encourage other people to lead their best lives. And that's the personal mission that I'm on. It extends in community service and the work that I do and writing. But now that I get to integrate that fully into my day job, every single investment we make, we're thinking, can we get an appropriate return for this? Because that's what we owe to our limited partners. But also, how can I use the capital that we're investing to make these companies, these leaders, the people that they serve better, so that we're leaving the world better than we found it in every case, or we're trying to when we invest in these places.
Here,
I don't
can
know that there's any more sacred work that we could be doing than the work of leading people to flourish. And I think the financial pathway is one way to do that, but deeper in that process is discovering our source. Ultimately, we believe here that the only way we flourish is first by becoming born again and meeting, a restorative relationship with Jesus and with what God's original design was. But out of that, we can begin to walk people into, the story of flourishing as well. Man, the financial industry is set up to do that really well. Jeff, you were about to say something as well.
Yeah, you're John. Great to be with you, and Mitch. And there's another Mitch Anthony, who's got a great quote that says, if we measure our progress by the Standard and Poor's, we have a very poor standard,
Mm.
right? I mean, it just speaks to that. And you also reminded me of community, and Mitch, you mentioned flipping the script. When I was at Merrill, we had all these wholesalers that would work with us and wanted to work with us. My last 8 years, I was in private banking, helping with investments for clients $10 million and above. And I wanted to flip the script because they would come, they would share expertise, they'd share their time, they'd be away from our families, they might do client seminars, they might help us close and win business, they would spend money. So what I did is once a year, I would host an investment partners meeting at my home. No, you could not wear a tie. This is back when people did wear ties. And we would cook for them, no cost to them, show up and thank them for their partnership, for their effort, for their time, for their expertise. And it became such a popular thing. I had firms like, ideally wanted like one or two people from each firm coming. We had firms that were bringing 6, 7, 8, 9 people, flying in from California into Pennsylvania and all these other places. Now, 10 plus years after I stopped doing this, I still hear wholesalers talk about that event. And we tried to have some fun with it, with the zip line and a putting contest and different things like that. But that's an example of flipping the script. And John, I love what you're doing, with your public investments and your private investments. And maybe, there happens to be a show that's streaming #1 right now on Amazon Prime. And you've had some involvement in that. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so about 2.5 years ago, we started to get interested in, among the other things that we're doing, investing in entertainment. And we saw both an opportunity for impact and potentially a commercial opportunity in that we believed that this was an underserved market in faith and family-friendly entertainment. So there were trends that were leading us to believe that. You saw the success of The Chosen, for example. Angel Studios had had some success with things like Sound of Freedom. And I had told my partners, look, if Dallas Jenkins or John Irwin come to us, I really want to think about whether to lean into this entertainment space and begin investing. John and Dallas did come to us with this idea for something called Wonder Project. And the idea was that they would build a faith and family friendly TV and movie studio that would develop content that would be good for families to discuss cross-generationally, watch together, that would include some explicitly faith-oriented content and some content that would just be good, wholesome content, the kind that used to be a little bit more prominent, I think, in movies and TV. And we believed in that vision. So Sovereign signed up to be the lead investor in the Wonder Project. We did so with a group of limited partners who supported us in that. And the success of that thus far has been phenomenal to see. It turned out that Amazon wanted to partner with Wonder. So immediately after we raised that independent financing for the Wonder Project to try and do things at Hollywood levels of quality, but with explicit faith and family alignment, Amazon put in a pretty large partnership related to content funding. And the first TV series that they greenlit was a show called House of David, which was intended to be the story of David, but kind of in the Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings style. So you could picture like The Chosen meets Lord of the Rings. And this idea that we were going to help alongside The Chosen and others to build out what we call the biblical cinematic universe, right? It's this incredible group of stories from the Bible that are so compelling, that have such adventure to them, that have real storylines involved, a lot of drama involved, but haven't been told, at least recently, very well. And it was a shocker to me that the story of David really hadn't been told well in movies or TV. So John Irwin and John Gunn, his writing partner, directed the first season of House of David. I got to be on set in Greece. It caught some attention. We actually had a big Wall Street Journal magazine article about it that came out last summer as they were on set with us in Greece with a ton of pictures. And on its release, we were all wondering how this would do because faith-based content or biblical stories really had not broken through other than The Chosen recently. And when it premiered on Amazon, It was 22 million viewers in the first 17 days. It actually became, to my knowledge, the first faith-based program to hit #1 on any major streaming platform. So the finale of House of David, I won't spoil it, but it is the story of David and Goliath, so you might guess, of season 1, hit #1 on Amazon Prime, one of the biggest streamers in the world. It was translated into dozens of languages, aired across hundreds of different countries, and the feedback has been absolutely phenomenal. And it proved that you can do these stories at a level of quality where you're not sacrificing watching content, entertainment, the quality of that because of your faith or because of your values, but you can actually get that level of quality through these great stories, and that there's a huge demand for that. And so we're excited about the progress with Wonder Project. They've got a few more things in the work. I was just on set yesterday with a new movie that's going to come out from the Wonder Project. It's been announced publicly, so I can say it stars Nate Bargatze, who's the biggest stand-up comedian in the world. Right now, they've been working on House of David season 2. We've got another TV show filming in the Atlanta area this summer. And we believe there's just this huge opportunity to shape culture through entertainment in a way that can be redemptive for the culture, but also hopefully build a business that's sustainable so that we can continue to do these things in the future rather than relying on philanthropy or other sources of funding to support it. That this can be a successful studio enterprise because of its quality and because of its great story, and not in spite of its faith and family-friendly alignment. So we're super pumped about it. My 12-year-old boy was really pumped about it because, as you can imagine, the Old Testament has a lot of battle scenes and a lot of real excitement. So he got into it a lot. But I would encourage all your listeners to check it out and know that, that type of content can exist because investors, particularly investors of faith, leaned into it and funded a studio that could do that at the level of quality that we all want to watch. So it's been an exciting journey.
Yeah, I love that,
Wow.
John. What a great story. And it's funny. I was doing a lunch event, and then there was a group that I didn't know what faith backgrounds they were from, but I mentioned that Eventide's founders are devout Christians, and I said, "Listen, we all know the story that Jesus turned water into wine. So why wouldn't Christians invest in alcohol companies?" And boy, did that ever get their attention. And most people don't hear that question posed to them at a wholesaler luncheon. And they were just befuddled. Yeah, why wouldn't they? And the really sad stat is that 70% of sales or revenue come from people who drink 10 or more drinks every day. So you're really profiting off of the harm of others. And we could talk about tobacco and how tobacco companies go into third world countries and give free cigarettes to young kids to get them addicted so that they're by their time they're 8, 9, 10, 12 years old, they're doing 2, 3 packs a day. And unfortunately, that tends to be the number one holding in some of our 529 plans. So we're sending our little Christian kids to college on the lungs of a of a little kid in a third world country. We can do better that. I mentioned the negative stuff only because there's capital being allocated there. Well, what if that capital was redirected towards wholesome things, towards things that we want, that brings shalom, that brings human flourishing to the world, that brings high quality entertainment to the world as you're doing. So I think when people wake up to the fact that investing is ownership, and ownership, in fact, all ethicists and theologians agree, which is crazy, that ownership does convey an ethical responsibility. I don't know that ethicists agree on anything else in the world, but they agree on that. And so if it conveys an ethical responsibility, well, then let's decide. We can argue, oh, should it be the nasty 9 or the sinful 7 or the filthy 5? I mean, whatever. Let people debate that. But let's put capital towards great things and we could all agree on that. And that's what I love about what you guys are doing, John, at Sovereign's Capital.
Yeah.
And most businesses would fit within that. We think about it as redemptive products or services, which is something we take into account when we're investing. And I like to say, Jeff, we have a very broad definition of that. I mean, we're invested alongside the largest used fire truck company in America, for example, a lineman training center, an organization that designs semiconductor factories. There are a lot of ways in which these things are good for the world, right? I mean, you can have a broad definition of organizations that are doing things that are positive in culture, and then we focus a lot on how those are run. So once you have a product or service that can be redemptive, are you running that in a redemptive way? Is your culture trying to shape that redemptively within the company? And like you said, capital has influence, and so your ability to invest those dollars gives you a seat at the table to try and influence whether that company is creating flourishing or not in the way it does business.
Yeah.
Yeah, good products plus good practices equals good profits.
I think what we're also doing here is we're activating or we're widening the lens of how we can preach the gospel. So often the preaching of the gospel is it shows up in the lens of the church. I'm on stage behind a pulpit and I'm preaching a sermon or I'm preaching to a crowd. And yet I'm reminded of St. Francis who says, preach the gospel always, and when necessary, use words. And I'm thinking, film, was he thinking of not just life in action, but maybe other creative ways that we can preach, like film, or through showing up in our vocational practice in a way that demonstrates good business? Are we potentially preaching that way? And man, I think so. And if we can activate that in addition to those who are going out carrying the message of Jesus to say, man, you have an opportunity to preach today. It may not be on stage in a pulpit, but your stage is an audience of, an Amazon streaming, top number list, film that's being created, or maybe it is that one-on-one advisors meeting. So I think there's so much going on. And John, I really appreciate your passion. And I'm so glad you took the risk and jumped out into that because it's giving us ideas of how we can show up in this space as well. Let's specifically think about the financial wholesaler right now. They're listening in. This is the group we're really focusing on. How does what we're talking about and through your experiences, how do you see that showing up specifically to a financial wholesaler today?
Yeah, absolutely. The financial advisor space and the wholesaling space, you get to touch on a lot of parts of different people's lives. I mean, you have influence over their giving, their spending, their investing, and each of those is quite important. I have a new book that I'm working on with Harvard Business Review to follow up on the Purpose book called that will be about how to use money to create flourishing in people's lives rather than something that's destructive of people's lives. And we've all seen stories where an influx of money can actually be bad for people. The Bible warns that the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, and that money misused is actually one of the most dangerous things that we encounter every day, right? It's something intuitive to us, and yet we live in a culture that chases money without thinking about the values that are attached to it. I think for financial wholesalers, there's a narrow investments part of this that I can speak to, but it's also just an encouragement in working with financial advisors and others. You are on a great mission to help individuals, organizations, 501(k) plans, et cetera, be a positive influence in people's lives. It can create savings for college. It can create financial freedom for people. We're pursuing returns because the limited partners or clients on the other side of those returns are doing great things there with their money. We have a lot of limited partners, for example, who are Christian foundations or Christian colleges or others, and we love the missions that they're on, and we want to see good returns for that. At the same time, we also want to see us build out the opportunities for people to deploy that capital and achieve their financial objectives, but do so in a way that helps them to achieve the cultural impact that they want to have according to the values of their faith, the values that would promote love of neighbor and human flourishing. I think for a wholesaler embedded within a larger organization or for a financial advisor, one of the keys to this is trying to lobby our different organizations to take this idea of values alignment and investment seriously. If you work within a large platform, for example, a wirehouse platform, if you work within a large asset manager, the idea might be to try and find those organizations that are actually investing in a way that's concordant with the values of our faith. Eventide, as I said, was my first exposure to that. Eventide has obviously built a track record over many years of really doing good while doing well, investing in this industry through the mutual funds that they've had. I think there are ETFs now, Jeff, that are accessible to people. But there are actually a broad number of firms that are doing that now. I think of our friends at Crossmark, a guy named Bob Dahl, who left his mainstream work at the same time I did when I left Invesco. Sovereigns Capital is trying to do that, and we've structure both private funds, but we also have an ETF, the Sovereigns Flourish Fund, now available that's trying to do the work we do in private companies and public companies. And there are a variety of other managers, both on the public side that may be more accessible to the average investor, as well as on the private side. And trying to find ways to emphasize those, to find partnerships with big firms so that those can become more available to a broader array of clients or limited partners, I think is something that we all have to work together to do. This idea of faith-driven investing or faith-aligned investing is it's old, I like to say, but it's new in some ways. The idea that Christians or Jewish people should align their values with their investments or with their financial work is as old as those faiths themselves. And yet we've only recently started to see a resurgence in funds that try and act on that specifically, particularly those with a positive thesis alongside the negative thesis, which Jeff articulated. And so I think the more we can work together to shine a light on those different firms, not just ours, but others, the more that we can create a client base for those firms so that they can grow, they can invest resources, and frankly, so that we can catalyze other funds to enter this space. One of the reasons we launched Faith Driven Investor as a nonprofit, my partners did, was so that we could encourage other investment management firms to take this idea of faith and values alignment seriously in the work that they do. So it wouldn't just be Sovereigns, it wouldn't just be Eventide, it wouldn't just be Crossmark, but that we could hopefully develop hundreds of different firms that are leaning into that thesis. And it's only with the weight of both that client exposure, which wholesalers can be so helpful with, as well as with the supply of product, which these firms can be helpful with, that we can make the kind of impact on culture I think that we all desire.
John, just today I was on a call with a group that wants to have a bigger impact in the greater Philadelphia area, which is faith-driven investor. Talk about that movement, because it is big, and you guys have done a phenomenal job of shining a light and awareness to that whole movement. So tell us a little bit more. How can a wholesaler get involved with faith-driven investor?
Yeah, that is such a great entry point, I think, Jeff, and you guys have been such great partners in that, you individually and Eventide as a firm. That group is now led by my partner, Henry Kastner. Henry decided to step away from the business to allow me to come in and co-lead Sovereigns. And as he did that, he took over Faith Driven Investor, Faith Driven Entrepreneur. They've recently merged with a group called Halftime so that they're running the halftime programs. And they have a great new program called Solving the World's Greatest Problems, which is about identifying the greatest problems in the world and directing both investment and philanthropic capital towards those. The cool thing is, as they built out that ecosystem, they've made a variety of resources and communities available. So every year we have a faith-driven investor conference that's virtual. People can host watch parties in their cities. Jeff, I know you've been essential to that yourself, but those are in many cities around the world. I'll get the numbers a bit wrong because I'm not Henry, so I might not be on top of it as his, but I think we had something like 60 different countries host faith-driven entrepreneur watch parties in the last go round. Almost as many host faith-driven investor parties where you just get together with a day with people in your community and you watch videos, you hear content, you collaborate together to talk about this movement. You can sign up online to get involved in your city. And even apart from the conference, there are often city-based programs with Faith-Driven Investor where you'll get investors to come and speak. You'll have entrepreneurs come and speak, and you talk as a community about how you can orient your values with your faith. And they've even introduced a foundations course where you can go for a number of weeks through a set curriculum with a group of people who are like-minded, either investors or entrepreneurs, depending on which you sign up for. And you watch videos from people like Andy Crouch, from Finney Curavilla at Eventide, from Robin John at Eventide, some of those from my partners and I, and many others. And you really develop a more sophisticated understanding of what the faith-driven entrepreneur and faith-driven investor movements look like. And we've just been so encouraged by that. Again, I might get the numbers a bit wrong, but I want to say something like 20,000 people have gone through the Faith-Driven Entrepreneur Foundations course at this point. I think several thousand people have gone through the Faith-Driven Investor curriculum or foundations course at this point. And those are all things, if you're a wholesaler, you can go to the Faith-Driven Investor or Faith-Driven Entrepreneur websites. You can sign up to get updates. You can join a city community. You can sign up to host watch parties or join watch parties for the annual conference. And you can sign up to go through these foundations course where you hopefully not just get a curriculum, but since you're going through that with a small group of other like-minded people, you often make friendships and create connections that can be helpful as you proceed on that journey.
Yeah, when we hosted the event last fall or last January, we had a combination of wholesalers, financial advisors and planners, and some individual investors, as well as of a couple of VC people attend um, at our facility here in Bucks County. One of the couples walked away and says, "I can't unsee what I just saw. It was so powerful. It was so amazing, so encouraging, so convicting." They're super excited to be on that journey. So yeah, encouraging folks to get involved with that is really good.
Well, I love what you're sharing too, because you're creating another resource. Behind it all, what I would say, it sounds like discipleship, right? And so there's this belief that we have as followers of Jesus that discipleship isn't just about believing in Jesus, it's about becoming like him.
Hmm.
And that's that lifelong journey of the ups and the downs, the hard but worth it. That this journey of becoming like Jesus. So along the way, we learn to pray like Jesus, right? We learn to love like Jesus, and yes, we even learn to give like Jesus. It touches in our world of generosity and stewardship and all of those places. And so while we may have our discipleship pathways in our church communities, this is another specific community to the financial professional and the financial wholesaler of going, how can I show up as a disciple and be equipped in a way that helps me specialize in my kingdom assignment where I'm already placed? And so I love that, John, for sharing that, because it just feels like you've done the work to really help equip those who are serving in that space.
Well, it's I should give a lot of credit to my partners, Henry in particular. You guys know Henry, and if folks aren't familiar with him, go watch some of his videos. I mean, he's just one of the most authentic, kind of faith-motivated guys I've ever met. Successful tech entrepreneur that, as he became successful, built a faith-driven company and then used the resources from that to really inspire and catalyze this movement. And so it's been what's been inspiring to me as a latecomer, since I only joined 4.5 years ago, is that Finney and Jeff and Robin and Henry and Bob and so many others were already leaning in deeply to this space. And it really has become a movement. I think there are more and more people thinking about the way that their faith intersects with their work, with the way in which they invest. And as that movement grows, I think our ability to impact one another's lives grows as well. And so that community that's forming is one of the most edifying things for me.
Oh man, this has been a great interview so far, and it's sad to think we got to land this thing. Anything that you're just thinking about now that's, something you got to get off your chest or talk about?
Yeah, I would leave with a sense of encouragement to people that Christians are kind of the largest quote unquote niche market in the world. When John came with the idea of the Wonder Project, it was actually a major movie studio he was working with that had commissioned McKinsey to study this weird Christian market they were thinking about. And they discovered magically that something like half of Americans were Christians, and it was the largest niche market in the world. And that holds true in financial services. It was actually the Christian church, the Episcopal Church, that jump-started the modern activist investment movement in 1971, where they challenged General Motors practices in apartheid South Africa alongside a guy named Leon Sullivan, who was a Black pastor at the Zion Baptist Church in Philadelphia. They failed in their initial motion, but they launched corporate principles called the Sullivan Principles that then reformed the way the business community worked in apartheid South Africa. And while ESG has grown to become this monolithic thing that people associate with values-based investing, there are about $120 trillion in managed assets in the world. ESG peaked at kind of $35 to $40 trillion at that, almost a third of the assets in the world. Now that questions have arisen about this monolithic approach, I think people are searching for what are the variety of ways we can actually reflect the specific values of people across the world in their different communities in a way that aligns their investments with faith. And of that 120 trillion, you've got to believe somewhere on the order of 20 to 40 trillion dollars of that is influenced or controlled by Christians. About half of that's in the United States. Obviously, Christian institutions whether they be churches or Christian colleges, control a great deal of assets. Individuals like those who are being served by financial advice firms hold a huge number of assets. And yet there haven't been a lot of tailored products for these people to really try and help them invest in a way that's market leading, but also do so in accordance with their faith. And so I think there is this huge commercial opportunity to rethink our approach to values and investing to meet the needs of hundreds of millions of people around the world controlling trillions of dollars in assets. And we're in the very first inning. The entire faith-driven investing ecosystem is somewhere in the order of $200 to $300 billion right now, most of it kind of negative screening. And so if you think about the assets that Christians influence or control, that would tell you there's a huge opportunity to invest in this way, in a way that serves the needs of those clients and also helps those clients to have an impact with their dollars on the world that they can feel proud of. So I think we're just in the first inning. I think being a part of this community helps us to grow that. And I truly think that we can transform the way in which financial services works in America and around the world.
I'm reminded of Andy Crouch. We mentioned him earlier that, he says that some of our investments are a bubble on top of a sinkhole. What he means is that, the bubble, the stocks are inflated, and the sinkhole is the fact that they're very much undermining the very fabric of our culture and our country and destroying humans' lives. And we have an opportunity to change that. One of the big lies is that greed is good. The old Wall Street movie from the 80s. Greed isn't good. Greed is one of the 7 deadly sins, and greed is taking something from someone that not right you don't rightly deserve, right? You're taking it from someone. So if we replace greed with generosity and replace faith, or replace fear with faith, that is highly profitable for the industry, for the families, for society, where then Wall Street starts to see, wow, I don't have to react emotionally to the ups and downs of the market. I understand that I actually own businesses, and these businesses are employing people, and these people are doing good things in the world. I could be more content with market volatility. I don't have to panic. And then if that happens, the advisors' lives are easier, the Wall Street profits are higher, everyone wins. In fact, I love that in God's economy, everyone wins, whereas in man's economy, sometimes there's a winner and a loser. And in our culture, we think of sports and we think of winners and losers, and it doesn't have to be that way. The ecosystem in a kingdom sense is very different. It's everyone wins.
Well, there you have it. For those of you listening in, another great episode of valuable insights and encouragement to just help frame you in to the plan A of God as a financial wholesaler. If you're wanting to learn more, a couple things we want to ask you to do is visit our website at kingdomwholesalers.com. There you can join the movement. You can get on our email list, stay connected to all of the latest and greatest news and events that are going to be coming your way. And then also find us on LinkedIn, Kingdom Wholesalers on LinkedIn, and follow us there as well as we begin to post this content out to the wide world that needs to hear the good news. John, thank you so much for joining us. We know we could spend hours with you just having these conversations, but thank you for what you shared today. And for our listeners, if they were wanting to connect with you today, where might they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can go to sovereignscapital.com if you're interested in exploring our firm. I'm on LinkedIn and fairly active there, so you can find me, John Coleman at Sovereigns Capital. And then for those interested kind of in investing, but also leadership and purpose, I have a Substack called On Purpose. So if you just look up On Purpose, John Coleman, you'll find that Substack and you can stay in touch.
Thank you for joining us. Whether you're new to wholesaling or a seasoned pro, Kingdom Wholesalers is here to encourage, equip, and empower you to lead boldly for Christ. Welcome to the movement.